For me to open up from warrior one to warrior two creates a compression in the joint and a stacking, a load bearing that is then torqued. So by creating compression and then trying to turn within that compression, there has the tendency over time to create, let's say, a wearing away or a weariness. Oh my goodness. Okay, questions regarding Warrior 1 transitioning to Warrior 2. In the sort of conventional way that transitions between Warrior 1 to Warrior 2 are taught, we're missing a lot of the influence that gravity and load bearing on joints play. So I'd like to demonstrate for you what a Warrior 1 transition to Warrior 2 can look like. Simple cueing, my front knee's over my ankle and my back heel is in line with my front heel. That's some systems of thinking. Some people will bring their foot a little bit wider in the back leg. What this allows is my pressing into my front quadricep engagement is going to actually create almost like an asymmetrical or diagonal force that I'm playing against. So now I can find my back foot and the outer edge of the foot deeply rooted into the earth. That's going to engage all the way up my outer thigh. The iliotibial band, the IT band, is going to start to engage, which is going to pull my right hip back and out. From here, you can see how my shoulders are sort of square with the length of my body, whereas in this, my shoulders are square with the short side of the mat, the front. Now, the transition between the two is that a lot of people will neglect the knee. And so they think that by repositioning the foot, everything should be copacetic within the hips. But this movement to this movement is actually quite substantial. Here in Warrior 1, I've given myself just a little bit of hinge from the hips so that there's not as much compression in my low back. But where the pelvis and the low back meet is quite sensitive for humans. There's a lot of compression that can happen there between the descending and ascending gravitational forces. Every time we walk, you can see how the body has to adapt against gravity. I might be being a little dramatic, but you can still see how when I drop my hip out to this side, this leg becomes load bearing, which brings my shoulder up on the side and down on the opposite side. That's happening all across the spine. This is how the body adjusts to gravity and is still able to walk around and move in the earth. So with Warrior 1, I've given myself some space in the low back. To transition to Warrior 2, my personal preference is to come out and reset, because the stacking and loading through the hip is not just happening at the hip, it's happening in the knee and it's happening at the foot. So folks who reposition just the foot often miss the torque that happens in the knee because we're worried less about it. When you're learning yoga asana, there's a lot of moving parts. It can be very complicated to try and hold the understanding of the foot and its integration with the hip and its integration. So what happens sometimes is that the knee gets neglected. And so if this is my hip and this is my foot, their engagement is great, but all of that torque happens through the knee. So as I engage more through the outer edge of my foot, and yet I'm peeling back my right hip, you can see that transitions from Warrior 1 to Warrior 2 are going to potentially cause some challenges. Because the outside of my back foot is very engaged through its outer edge, it's creating almost a drawing down of the outer hip. The more I activate my outer right foot, the more my outer right hip is going to pull down and back, which is going to create all sorts of space in the pelvis, but it's also going to create a lot of compression through the joint, like the SI joint, the sacroiliac joint. My personal preference is to transition from Warrior 1 to Warrior 2 by coming out of the pose. Giving yourself a chance to reset the hips. And then to come back with a reacquaintance of the foundation of the earth. You want to have the feet on the ground in this new manner because it seems subtle. The Warrior 1 and Warrior 2 hips do have a different spaciousness. They have a different intention. And we want to play with that as well as we possibly can. To me, that means resetting. Finding again the spaciousness so that we can come back up and reacquaint ourselves with the ground so that we can then begin to expand in all directions. You can notice how active my hands are here in Warrior 2 and in Warrior 1. Neurologically, it's called muscle recruiting. By engaging through the fingertips, by activating through the feet, I'm encouraging my nervous system to signal the need for more support, more engagement. So by activating my feet in a spacious and expansive capacity, really contacting the earth, outer edge of the foot engaged is going to traction up through the outer thigh and pull the outer hip back and down, creating more space for the pelvis, more capacity for me to be stable here, to be strong, but also to feel the pelvic bowl expand. For me personally, I think that in the long run for our practice, there's already so much pushing past the edge. So many students are hypermobile. So many students don't have the same sort of capacity, but you go into a room in a class and see the broad spectrum of a yoga practice. First day, beginner, daunting, all the way through to somebody who's been practicing for 16 or 28 years, and the effortlessness at which they seem to embody their home, their body. It can be overwhelming. One of my favorite ways of moving from Warrior 1 to Warrior 1 is by dynamically engaging the arms with the breath. Moving my arms down to my hips at the same time as I'm exhaling allows my diaphragm to move upwards while my arms are moving down. What this does in the opposition is, as I'm inhaling and the diaphragm is moving down into the abdomen, my arms are reaching up at the same time as I'm bending into my front leg, creating traction both above and below. It's a wonderful way to really explore the diaphragm, and it's a wonderful way to work on your breath capacity, starting with a 4-4 count, working to a 5-5 count or a 6-6 count, and just expanding upon how long it actually takes you to perform the count. Arms up, arms down, maybe a count of 5. Arms up, arms down, count of 6, 7, 8. Working to lengthen this is going to create a greater capacity as you perform this demanding posture.